This is obviously a bill of immense proportions and implications for us as a nation, for our economy, for consumers, for our place in the world, and for how we deal with the passing on of the quality of life which we have to our children, so that they can live in an environment that will sustain them and be sure that we do not overly pollute our world or our atmosphere. And the initiative, I think the senator from California needs to be congratulated for moving the initiative forward. It's my opinion that this is a debate that needs to be pursued aggressively, and it is, and I respect all the different parties who have views on this, and there's been some really excellent discussion of how we should proceed in this area. In the past, I've strongly supported initiatives which are similar to this effort in the sense that they try to reduce the amount of pollutants which we put into our atmosphere through a variety of different means. The Lieberman-McCain bill and the Copper-Alexander bill, both of which I supported, attempted to do this also. This bill, however, is much more comprehensive, much more extensive, and the implications of it are far greater to our economy and to our quality of life here in the United States. It's safe to say, I think, that were this bill to become law in its present form, it would impact our future as much as anything that we could do after addressing the issue of defeating global terrorism as it attempts to try to destroy our culture, and after addressing the issue of making sure that we're fiscally solvent as a result of the costs of programs which we already have on the books, such as entitlements. So it is a tremendous issue, and it deserves serious and thoughtful consideration, which it is getting so far in this debate. And I respect both sides' arguments. I find myself on this issue in a variety of different camps, because I'm attracted to parts of the bill, but I find other parts of the bill to be very difficult. I'm not going to get into all the different elements. I mean, I'm concerned about the effect on our competitiveness internationally. I'm concerned that if we put these limitations on our economy in place, that economies like India and China, which will not be subject to these type of limitations, will simply pursue courses which end up polluting at a rate that overwhelms whatever we save, and that as a practical matter we may significantly undermine our competitiveness. That concerns me. I'm concerned about how this whole cap and trade issue is going to work. I'm concerned that NOx and carbon that are not addressed. I'm concerned that we're looking at an issue here of how the science is not up to speed to the requirements that are being put on the industries which must reduce their pollution. NOx and sulfur, I said carbon, excuse me. There is a legitimate question of whether we're putting the cart before the horse relative to the science of the capacity to deliver these savings. For example, in the area of savings of reduction of pollutants, I believe strongly that we need to pursue a much more aggressive policy in the area of nuclear. But the question of whether we could bring online the nuclear generating capacity necessary to meet the requirements of this bill is very much an issue and very much in doubt, simply because of our permitting procedure in this country, coupled with the fact that the industrial complex in this country does not have the capacity to produce the nuclear plants in a time frame necessary in order to comply with what would be the reductions necessary under this bill. So those are some of my concerns. But again, I come back to the fact that I think the concept of cap and trade, as proposed in this bill, is a path which we need to seriously consider going down. However, on a parallel path, I have very severe concerns, very serious concerns. And that is that this bill, under its present structure, is going to generate value of approximately $6.7 trillion over its life. Over the next 10 years, it's estimated that the sale of these allowances will approximately be $1 billion. That most of this will come into the federal treasury, not all of it, but much of it will come into the federal treasury. And then under this bill, it gets spent for the most part. There is a $800 billion set aside theoretically, but it's done by a sense of the Senate, as just noted. But the vast majority of this money gets spent by creating new programmatic activity and expanding the size of the federal government. Now this $6 trillion plus is cost. It comes as a function of cost. It will be passed on to the American consumer in the form of increased electrical bills. Now, I think the American consumer is willing to pay a higher price for electricity if they feel that they are significantly and positively impacting the reduction of the emission of greenhouse gases, which are affecting our climate. And thus, I'm willing to vote for putting that type of cost in place. But what I'm not willing to vote for is taking that money and using it to radically expand the size of the federal government. If you look at the proposals in this bill, it has essentially become the most massive exercise in earmarking that we've ever seen. It dwarfs the Farm Bill, which is hard to do when it comes to earmarks. And as a very practical matter, that's not fair to working Americans. The working Americans under this bill are going to be hit with a new consumption tax. Let's be honest about that. That's what this bill does. It creates a massive new consumption tax, which is called allowances, which gets sold, but the price of paying for those allowances will go back into the rate base, will raise the cost of electricity, and will be a consumption tax. And Americans working at their jobs, trying to make ends meet, trying to take care of their families, are going to see their energy bills go up because they're going to get hit with this new consumption tax. I believe very fervently that if we are going to go down this road of creating this massive new consumption tax, the purpose of which is to promote the reduction of greenhouse gases, which will reduce our impact on the global climate, negative impact, then we need at the same time to reduce, for working Americans, the burden of their taxation in other places. This should be a one-for-one trade, very simply. If we're going to say to working Americans, we're going to increase your consumption tax over here by $6.7 trillion, or if you take out the money which is under here represented as going by a sense of the Senate to tax reduction, it'll be somewhere around $4+ trillion. If you're going to do that type of a major tax impact and essentially shift the economy to a national consumption tax, you know, many states have sales taxes, but there is no national consumption tax. If you're going to shift to a national consumption tax, then you need to take those dollars, in my opinion, and reduce the burden on working Americans one for one, so that you mitigate the impact on their quality of life and on their ability to be productive citizens and on their ability to pursue a lifestyle which they can afford. Now, there are a variety of ways to do this. You can reduce income tax rates. You can take the consumption tax, which is going to flow into the federal treasury, and you can move it to income tax rates, the reduction of income tax rates. Or you can take the consumption tax, which is going to flow into the federal treasury through these allowances, and you can use it to reduce the FICA tax, the Social Security tax, which is an across-the-board tax that all working Americans pay. Or you can take the consumption tax, which is going to be generated by this bill, and you can use it as under some sort of rebate proposal has been proposed by the senator from Tennessee, where people, I believe his proposal is people making less than $150,000 would get a rebate reflecting the amount of money coming into the Treasury under the allowance sales. But what you should not do with this new consumption tax, if I used 10 minutes, I would ask consent to go for another 5 minutes.
Without an objection is heard.
Well, I would ask consent to go for another 2 minutes.
Is there objection?
President, I will yield my good friend a minute or two off mine. It's just that several senators are waiting, including myself, to speak. Why don't you take
2 minutes.
2 minutes off mine?
I appreciate that, Senator from Virginia.
Without objection.
What we should not do with this major new consumption tax is use it to expand the size of the federal government, to put in place a series of initiatives which are essentially being used for the purposes of building constituencies who will support this bill. That's the way legislation passes around here, but it's wrong. It's wrong when we do it in the agriculture area. It's going to be especially wrong when we do it in the energy production area. American consumers should not be hit with this tax and have no rebate coming to them or no tax cut coming to them on the other side of the ledger to try to mitigate the impact of this consumption tax. Mr. President, I yield the floor.